We're counting down the 15 most unforgettable but forgotten Italian-American dishes your Nonna used to make. From lavish desserts and stuffed pastas to legendary Sunday simmered sauces, each entry spotlights the iconic foods, rituals, and restaurant memories that defined a generation, many now lost to time. Which dish tops our celebration of comfort, abundance, and culinary adaptation? Let's begin our journey into nostalgia, starting with number 15 and the unmistakable atmosphere that made every meal magic. Red-checked tablecloths stretched across every table, their gingham pattern as familiar as a family photo. The moment you stepped inside, the world outside faded. Candle wax dripped in thick colored rivers down empty Chianti bottles, each one a monument to 1,000 dinners past. Plastic grapevines curled overhead, twining through latticework and casting gentle shadows on the booths below. Dean Martin's voice floated from ceiling speakers, wrapping the room in a velvet haze of nostalgia. The walls often boasted hand-painted scenes of Venetian canals or Tuscan hills, promising a taste of Italy, at least as imagined in mid-century America. Vinyl booths squeaked as families slid in, menus as big as placemats promising platters sized for sharing. These restaurants didn't just serve food, they staged a performance. Every detail designed to make you feel welcome, prosperous, and just a little bit transported. For children of the 1960s and 70s, this was the backdrop to every birthday, every graduation, every Sunday out. Before the first meatball ever hit the table, the stage was set. Abundance, comfort, and a sense of belonging, all under the warm glow of waxy candlelight. Dessert was never an afterthought in these dining rooms. It was the grand finale, proof that no one left hungry or uncelebrated. Spumoni arrived first, a slice of 3 distinct layers: chocolate, pistachio, and cherry, studded with jewel-like bits of candied fruit. Every forkful was a surprise, sometimes cool and creamy, sometimes with a flash of almond or citrus. Tortoni followed, nestled in its crinkled white paper cup, dense with almond flavor and topped with a crown of crunchy amaretti crumbs. Kids would peel away the paper, letting the cold semifreddo melt just enough on their tongues. Then came the cannoli, always filled to order, never in advance, or the shell would lose its snap. Ricotta sweetened just so, sometimes mixed with chocolate chips or pistachios, piped into the shell with a practiced hand. The first bite sent flakes of pastry everywhere, a small mess that meant you were doing it right. Tiramisu hadn't arrived yet. For this generation, dessert meant abundance. Trays of cookies, pastries, and ice cream, even after the biggest meal. Sweetness wasn't just a taste. It was a ritual, a way to make every gathering feel like a holiday. Stromboli and calzones never came from Italy. They were born in the heart of American pizza shops, shaped by the hunger for something hot, portable, and absolutely stuffed. The Stromboli story begins in 1950 at Romano's Pizzeria in Essington, Pennsylvania, where Nazareno Romano wrapped cold cuts and cheese inside pizza dough, rolled it up, and baked it until golden. Some say the name was inspired by Ingrid Bergman's film Stromboli, whose poster hung in the shop that year. But South Philly families claim their own bakeries rolled out Stromboli first, and the debate still simmers in old neighborhoods. What's not in dispute, Stromboli is always a rolled log, sliced crosswise, never folded. The calzone, on the other hand, traces back to Naples. It's a half-moon turnover, folded and sealed, usually filled with ricotta and mozzarella. In America, both got the overstuffed treatment: pepperoni, sausage, mushrooms, mozzarella oozing out, sometimes bursting at the seams. Marinara sauce was served on the side for dipping, a nod to American abundance. By the 1970s, both Stromboli and calzones had become mall food court staples, their origins tangled, but their appeal undeniable. For kids, cold leftover slices in a lunchbox meant you'd won the jackpot. Wedding soup didn't start out as a celebration dish. Its real name in Italy was minestra maritata, meaning married soup, not for a bride and groom, but for the marriage of greens and meats simmered together in a single pot. When Southern Italian immigrants landed in America, the name changed. Parish cookbooks and family stories began calling it wedding soup, a translation slip that stuck. The American version shifted too. Instead of pork or sausage and bitter greens, cooks used beef meatballs the size of marbles, soft escarole or spinach, and a clear chicken broth. Pasta, acini di pepe or tiny stars, joined the mix, giving the soup its signature texture. For many families, this soup had two lives. It appeared at wedding banquets, but more often, it was the food you got when you were sick, a gentle promise that you'd feel better soon. Grandmothers shaped hundreds of tiny meatballs by hand, convinced that the smallest ones healed fastest. In the end, wedding soup became a comfort ritual, its name and recipe both transformed by the journey across the Atlantic. Manicotti and stuffed shells brought the whole family into the kitchen on Saturday night, turning dinner prep into a production line. Giant pasta tubes or shells, sometimes as big as a child's hand, were laid out on flour-dusted tables. Each was filled with a mixture of ricotta, stretched with cottage cheese if the budget called for it, eggs, mozzarella, romano, parsley, and for some, a grating of nutmeg that only Nonna knew to add. The filling was spooned or piped in. Then the pasta was nestled into pans slick with tomato sauce, covered with more sauce and a blanket of mozzarella. Every aunt had her own secret, a pinch of cream cheese for creaminess, a handful of chopped spinach for color, or a sprinkle of black pepper. Once assembled, trays were wrapped in foil, ready for the oven or, just as often, the freezer. Insurance for unexpected guests or a busy week ahead. On Sunday, these cheesy, bubbling casseroles would land on the table, each bite a reminder of the hands that made them. Kids sometimes unstuffed the shells to eat the filling straight, savoring the rich, herby interior before tackling the pasta. Manicotti and shells didn't just feed a crowd, they proved that abundance was a family affair. Veal was the dish that meant you had arrived. In the dining rooms of the 1960s and 70s, seeing veal on the menu, Parmigiana, Marsala, Piccata, Scallopine, signaled a special occasion. The cutlets, pounded thin and delicate, cost more than any chicken or pork, and their preparation required extra care. Dredged in flour, sautéed in butter, finished with white wine or lemon, sometimes blanketed in bubbling mozzarella. For many families, ordering veal meant celebrating a graduation, a promotion, an anniversary. The meat's pale color and tenderness carried an aura of European refinement, something to be savored, not scarfed. But veal's reign didn't last. By the mid-1970s, prices for veal began to climb, pinched by inflation and meat shortages. Restaurant menu audits from that era show shrinking veal portions, with some kitchens blending in cheaper meats or quietly swapping chicken for the pricier cut. Then, in the 1980s, animal rights protests and nationwide boycotts pushed veal off many tables entirely. Headlines chronicled the decline, and chefs scrambled for alternatives. Chicken, once the backup, stepped into the spotlight. Diners who once splurged on veal parmigiana found themselves developing a taste for its more affordable cousin. Today, veal survives mostly as a memory of candlelit booths, white tablecloths, and the feeling that, for one night, you were dining like royalty. Caesar salad arrived at Italian-American tables with a flourish, but its story began far from Rome. In 1924, Cesar Cardini, an Italian immigrant running a restaurant in Tijuana, Mexico, found himself facing an Independence Day rush with dwindling supplies. He pulled together what he had: crisp romaine hearts, raw egg yolk, olive oil, lemon juice, garlic, parmesan, and crunchy croutons. With a theatrical sweep, Cardini tossed everything together in a large wooden bowl right in front of his guests. No anchovies, those would come later, but a dash of Worcestershire sauce added a hint of the sea. The spectacle was as important as the taste. Diners watched as each leaf was coated, the salad finished with a shower of cheese and a crack of pepper from a mill the size of a baseball bat. Hollywood stars and American tourists carried the memory of that tableside show north, and by the 1950s, Caesar salad had become a mark of sophistication in Italian-American restaurants. Waiters in tuxedos wheeled wooden bowls to the table, mashed garlic and anchovies into a paste, broke raw eggs, and tossed romaine with practiced flair. Guests felt like insiders watching the ritual unfold. Each restaurant claimed a secret recipe, some adding mayonnaise or MSG, others insisting on hand-torn croutons made from yesterday's garlic bread. Bottled Caesar dressing would come later, but in the red-checkered era, the performance was the point. The salad's Mexican origin faded behind the spectacle, but for a generation, Caesar salad meant you were dining somewhere special before the garlic bread ever hit the table. Garlic bread wasn't brought from Italy, but by the 1960s, it was as much a part of the Italian-American table as red sauce and Chianti bottles. The method was simple and brilliant. Take a soft white bakery loaf, slice it lengthwise, and smear every inch with a mixture of softened butter, garlic powder from a jar, and a dusting of dried parsley. Some cooks added a sprinkle of grated Parmesan for bite. Others kept it pure and buttery. The loaf was wrapped in foil, then baked until the butter melted deep into the crumb, pooling in the crevices and soaking the crust. When pulled from the oven, each piece tore away with a satisfying stretch. The bottom crisp and golden, the middle almost custardy with fat. Diner menus and recipe cards from the era revealed just how standardized this side became. No pasta dinner was complete without a basket of warm garlic bread on the table. Fancier spots offered a cheese bread upgrade, blanketing the loaf with thick slices of whole milk mozzarella before baking. The cheese bubbled and browned, creating crispy edges that children claimed first. Every family had a preferred style. Some wanted extra garlic. Others wanted the bread so buttery it left fingerprints on the tablecloth. There was no pretense of Italian tradition here, just the promise of comfort, abundance, and a way to mop up every last drop of sauce. Garlic bread was the unofficial invitation to dig in, always arriving before the antipasto platters and setting the tone for the feast to follow. Antipasto platters in Italian-American restaurants weren't just appetizers, they were a declaration. At every celebration, from wedding halls to Sunday suppers, these spreads arrived first, sprawling across the table and promising more food than anyone could possibly finish. The foundation was always a bed of iceberg lettuce, crisp and cold, chosen not for Italian tradition but for its American crunch and the way it held up under the weight of everything piled on top. Rolled slices of mortadella, capicola, and Genoa salami formed neat ribbons along the edges. Pepperoni, fanned out in concentric circles, glistened alongside chunks of sharp provolone and fresh mozzarella balls. Marinated mushrooms, artichoke hearts, roasted red peppers, and cherry peppers stuffed with prosciutto added bursts of color. Each bite briny, tangy, or sweet. Olives and anchovies filled every gap, while pepperoncini curled like question marks over the heap. The sheer size of these platters was the point. They often overhung the table's edge, signaling that no one would leave hungry. At weddings, antipasto displays could stretch the length of a banquet hall, a visual boast of family prosperity and generosity. In these moments, abundance was art. Each platter a canvas, every ingredient an invitation to share. Before pizza, before pasta, antipasto told the story of arrival, success, and the joy of gathering together. Pizza in Italian-American hands became something entirely new, a dish that split along regional lines and fueled hometown pride for generations. In New York, thin crusts stretched wide across aluminum pans built for speed and volume. Slices were so big you had to fold them in half, letting orange grease drip onto paper plates as you walked home from the corner pizzeria. The dough was chewy, the cheese bubbled and browned, and the sauce just sweet enough to keep you coming back. Every block claimed its own champion, and the question of who made the best slice could start arguments that lasted decades. Meanwhile, Chicago went in the opposite direction. Deep dish pizza, with its cornmeal crust pressed high along the sides of a cast-iron pan, arrived at the table like a savory pie. Cheese went on first, then sausage or pepperoni, and finally a thick layer of chunky tomato sauce. One slice weighed as much as a sandwich, and eating more than two felt like a personal challenge. Local pride ran deep. New Yorkers called it casserole, Chicagoans called it dinner, and neither side would budge. By the early 1960s, pizza's popularity exploded beyond city neighborhoods. Toppings multiplied: anchovies, green peppers, mushrooms, and then, in a move that scandalized purists, pineapple. The first documented Hawaiian pizza appeared in Canada in 1962, but it spread quickly to American menus, dividing families and sparking debates that still echo today. Then came the rise of the pizza chain. Pizza Hut, founded in 1958, rolled out its thick and chewy pan pizza in 1970. Franchise memos from the era show a push for bigger portions and softer crusts, designed to please everyone from suburban parents to college kids. Birthday parties, Friday nights, and teenage hangouts revolved around pizza parlors with jukeboxes and red pepper shaker jars. Every town had its own rituals, but the story was always the same. Pizza wasn't just food. It was the center of the social universe, endlessly adaptable and fiercely defended. Baked ziti meant the whole block was invited. In church basements, VFW halls, and row house kitchens, aluminum pans of ziti lined every table, bubbling with cheese and tomato sauce, promising comfort and plenty. The recipe was never fixed. Some families hid hard-boiled eggs or tiny meatballs deep in the layers. Others swirled in extra mozzarella or a handful of grated Romano for sharpness. Ricotta was the heart, stretched as far as it could go, folded into the pasta until every tube was stuffed and creamy. Meat sauce, rich and red, seeped into every corner, binding noodles and cheese together into one glorious casserole. At funerals, wedding showers, or block parties, someone always arrived with a foil-covered pan, still warm from the oven. Parish cookbooks from the 1960s read like a love letter to ziti, with recipes scribbled in the margins. Add more cheese if you have it. Don't forget the eggs. The dish traveled well, reheated even better, and never failed to draw a crowd. Leftovers were prized. Each day in the fridge only deepened the flavors, and a quick pass under the broiler brought those coveted crispy edges back to life. Kids hovered near the buffet, angling for a corner piece where the pasta turned crunchy and the cheese browned just right. The center was soft and molten, but the corners, those were gold. Baked ziti wasn't just a meal. It was a sign the neighborhood took care of its own, one overflowing pan at a time. Chicken parmigiana didn't start with chicken at all. In the kitchens of early Italian immigrants, eggplant parmigiana was the dish that brought everyone to the table, a way to turn a humble vegetable into something rich and celebratory. But by the 1960s, with American supermarkets stocked with endless chicken and families craving something heartier, the eggplant quietly stepped aside. Chicken breasts, butterflied and pounded thin, took its place. Each piece was dredged in flour, dipped in egg, and pressed into seasoned breadcrumbs before hitting hot oil, crackling to a golden brown. The kitchen filled with the scent of frying, the promise of comfort in every sizzle. Then came the mozzarella, whole milk, sliced thick, layered over the cutlets until not a speck of crust showed. A generous ladle of tomato sauce, often sweetened just a little, blanketed the cheese. The whole tray slid under the broiler until the mozzarella bubbled and browned, forming crispy edges that kids would fight over at the dinner table. Chicken parm always landed on a mountain of spaghetti, soaking up the sauce, turning one plate into 2 meals. Restaurants leaned into this abundance, advertising chicken parm with spaghetti as a Friday night special. After high school football games, Crowds packed into pizzerias, ordering platters big enough to share, but always hoping for leftovers. Those leftovers had a second life. Cold slices of chicken parm tucked into sub-rolls, wrapped in wax paper, became the next day's hero sandwiches, a lunchroom prize that drew jealous stares. Menus from the era reveal chicken parm's rapid rise, pushing aside veal as prices climbed and tastes shifted. By the mid-1970s, nearly every neighborhood spot claimed their version was the best, each promising a thicker cheese layer or crispier crust. For many, the memory of scraping up the last bits of brown cheese from the pan is as vivid as the first bite. Chicken Parmigiana captured everything Italian-American food promised: comfort, plenty, and a little bit of showmanship, all in one bubbling, sauce-stained plate. Spaghetti and meatballs was the showstopper. Not just a meal, but a spectacle. One that never really existed in Italy, but became the gold standard of Italian-American comfort. Every neighborhood restaurant claimed their version was the best, and the proof was always in the size of the meatballs. Some were as big as a child's fist, packed with a blend of beef, pork, and sometimes veal, seasoned with parsley and parmesan, then fried to a deep brown before being dropped into a bubbling pot of marinara. Menus boasted of baseball-sized meatballs, and regulars would challenge each other to finish a whole platter. The sauce, thick, red, and glossy, clung to every strand of spaghetti, leaving orange halos on white plates and shirts alike. The ritual of eating was as important as the food itself. Fork in one hand, spoon in the other, you learned to twirl the pasta into perfect, sauce-soaked nests. The spoon wasn't Italian, but it was gospel in these dining rooms. Kids practiced the technique until it was second nature, and every adult had an opinion about the right way to do it. Restaurant competitions became local legend. In New York, stories circulated about Mama Leone's serving platters so large they needed 2 waiters to carry them. In Chicago, Sabatino's was famous for meatballs that could double as paperweights. Oral histories from the era are filled with boasts. Whose Nonna's recipe was the juiciest, which chef could make the most tender meatball, who could eat the most in one sitting. The dish became a badge of identity, a way to say, "We've made it." Leftovers were never wasted. Cold meatballs tucked into a soft roll, drenched in extra sauce and maybe a slice of mozzarella, made the legendary meatball sub, a lunchroom prize that could spark envy across the table. For many, the memory of spaghetti and meatballs isn't just about taste, but about belonging. It crowned the table before the all-day Sunday gravy ritual even began, offering a taste of abundance and a promise that there would always be enough to go around. Sunday in an Italian-American home started before dawn, with the heavy pot, sometimes battered aluminum, sometimes enamel, set on the stove, its orange-stained sides proof of years of service. Olive oil shimmered, garlic and onions hit the heat, and the kitchen filled with a scent that signaled the day's true beginning. Tomato paste was stirred until it darkened, then hand-crushed canned plum tomatoes, usually imported, were poured in, a pinch of sugar added to soften their bite. The real heart of the ritual was the meat: sweet Italian sausage, pork ribs, beef braciole rolled with herbs and cheese, and meatballs shaped by memory. Each piece was a quiet celebration, a sign that the family had moved beyond the lean years of the old country. The sauce, always called gravy here, simmered for 6, sometimes 8 hours. By midday, the house was thick with the smell of tomatoes, basil, and slow-cooked meat. Children hovered, hoping for a taste, but Nonna ruled the kitchen, wooden spoon in hand, deciding when the gravy was ready. The oil would rise, forming a red ring on top, a signal that patience had been rewarded. Some families tested doneness by the color of the bubbles, others by whether a spoon could stand upright in the pot. Sunday gravy was more than food. It was a ritual that anchored the week and defined the family. The serving order was fixed: First, a mountain of pasta tossed with the rich, meaty gravy, each plate streaked orange at the edges. Only after the pasta did the meats appear, arranged on a platter, each cut claimed by someone who had waited all day. The meal unfolded slowly with stories, laughter, and debates over whether the gravy needed more salt or if Nonna's was the best. Some kitchens had a wooden spoon passed down for generations, its handle darkened by time, its bowl worn smooth by decades of stirring. Cookbooks rarely held the real recipe. Secrets were passed down through memory, through hands that rolled meatballs or judged the sauce by scent alone. Oral histories recalled children sent to fetch bread, men returning with bakery loaves, grandmothers who could fix a sauce gone wrong with a single gesture. Even the mishaps, a splatter on a shirt, a scorched towel, a sausage dropped and rescued, became part of the family legend. By meal's end, the pot was nearly empty, the table crowded with stained plates, and for a few hours, everyone belonged. Sunday gravy was less about the ingredients and more about what it brought out. Memory, belonging, and the promise that at least once a week, there would always be enough. A night out at an Italian-American restaurant in the 1960s or 70s was more than a meal. It was a production, a shared fantasy of arrival and belonging. Walk through the doors of a place like Mama Leone's in New York, and the world transformed. Waiters in tuxedos swept past with platters big enough to feed a baseball team, their voices rising in song whenever a birthday candle appeared. The dining room buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, every table crowded with family, friends, and newcomers who felt like regulars by dessert. Menus read like manifestos of plenty, antipasto platters spilling over, pasta bowls that disappeared beneath mounds of sauce, and entrees so large they needed their own zip code. There was always a house wine, poured from bottles wrapped in straw baskets, passed down the table with a wink. Even the salad came in endless waves, crisp iceberg, tomatoes, peppers, and a dressing so tangy it made your mouth water before the first bite. No one kept count of refills. The point was to never run out. Service was theater, and the staff played their parts to perfection. On birthdays, the entire crew would circle the table, clapping and singing in harmony, sometimes with a tambourine or accordion in tow. Diners blushed, children beamed, and for a few minutes, everyone in the room was in on the celebration. These moments became family legend retold for years. The time Uncle Tony got serenaded with happy birthday in 3 languages, or when the waiter balanced a tray of cannoli on one hand while pouring sambuca with the other. Sambuca, always served with 3 coffee beans floating on top, one for health, one for happiness, one for prosperity, signaled the meal's end and the start of after-dinner stories. Some sipped slowly, savoring the licorice warmth, while others let the beans crunch between their teeth, a tiny ritual passed down like a secret handshake. The tablecloths were stained, the bread baskets empty, but no one hurried to leave. There was always another toast, another round of laughter, another story about Nonna's sauce or the best corner piece of ziti. Patrons who grew up in these rooms recall more than just flavors. They remember the feeling of being part of something bigger, a community built on generosity and welcome. Interviews with regulars at Mama Leone's describe the thrill of seeing your name in icing on a birthday cake, or the pride of introducing a friend to your waiter who always remembered your favorite dish. For many, these restaurants were the first place they felt truly American, able to celebrate their heritage and success in the same breath. The experience was never just about food. It was about theater, about being seen and celebrated, about knowing that for one night, there would be enough for everyone. The murals, the music, the endless platters and bottomless bowls, each detail was a promise kept. As the night wore on and the last espresso cooled, diners carried that feeling home. The certainty that they belonged, that they had arrived, and that the story of their family was written into every meal. That's the true legacy of the Italian-American table: abundance, memory, and the joy of sharing all you have with all who gather. From the red-checked tablecloths that set the stage to the grand finale of overflowing antipasto platters and all-day Sunday gravy, this countdown has uncovered 15 dishes and dining rituals that define the golden age of Italian-American cuisine. Some surprises stood out, like Caesar salad's Mexican roots, or how spaghetti and meatballs, virtually unknown in Italy, became an American icon. Across every entry, abundance and adaptation were the common threads. Recipes transformed with local ingredients, family teamwork, and a drive to celebrate prosperity. The ranking highlights that the true essence of Italian-American food was not just in the dishes themselves, but in the experience, family-style portions, theatrical service, and a sense of belonging. These forgotten classics remind us that Italian-American cuisine was never about strict authenticity. It was about creating joy from memory and possibility. In every oversized portion and every shared meal, this food told the story of immigrants turning aspiration into tradition, leaving behind a legacy of comfort, celebration, and community.